Thank you everyone for coming. This is our first guest speaker of the year. We have Eric Ju.
Eric Ju is a general partner at Bachmanity Capital focused on enterprise software, data, and fintech deals. Prior to co-founding Bachmanity, Eric co-founded an international AI hackathon backed by Tesla and founded a startup amassing over 49,000 members, leading to an acquisition. He was also the head of marketing for a climate fintech startup, which was acquired for 7 figures in April of 2021. Currently, Eric is also the founder of Aviato, which is accelerating deal flow for scouts and VCs, leveraging key data insights. Aviato's impressive track record is exemplified from having the financial backing of 8VC, Sequoia Scout Fund, Soma Capital, founder of GitHub, Republic Capital, and more. Besides his entrepreneurial pursuits, Eric's commitment to giving back is evident in his position on the board of the Cronin Childhood Cancer Foundation, backed by Mark Cuban. All right, so just to start up, when did you first develop an interest in the startup world?
I kind of just met the right people at the right time. So it was like kind of during quarantine. So I was initially from Indiana, which is like pretty much the middle of nowhere. But yeah, I ended up like meeting the right people at the right time during quarantine, and then got really lucky. I think San Francisco was sort of a Discord server back in the day, and then met the right people, got a few jobs, and then ended up just ended up here. So it was pretty interesting.
What is the story behind Aviato, and how did you come up with this idea and go through the execution?
Yeah, so kind of how Aviato works is, in public markets right now, right? So if you guys look at public markets, if you guys know Wall Street, everyone uses algorithms, right? It's relying on algorithms, it's relying on quantitative tools. So in public markets, all the traders are relying on these very complicated and quantitative tools to predict the future on where the stocks are going, right? But 30 years ago, all these same firms were trading off of these charts. So there weren't these analysis tools. Citadel didn't build their quantitative tools. They were all just relying on charts, right? So that's kind of the picture of private markets today, where everyone in private markets right now are trading off of data aggregators. So data aggregators being like the PitchBooks, the Crunchbases of the world. What we do is we help bring what people built in public markets today into private markets. So adding the analysis, for example, figuring out how many shares an employee has, who's likely to leave a company, when a company is going to run out of money and stuff like that, and selling that to like the biggest private equity firms, investment banks, venture funds and sales teams and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting. But I started this around, I think, 2.5 years ago. We initially started as a private equity firms or as SME database for private equity firms. So a lot of private equity firms are buying small businesses and roll-ups, which is a whole different asset class. But yeah, and then we pivoted to building startup data, and that's been working really well. So that's kind of what Aviato does. But it's a pretty niche, I guess, company, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's really impressive. So now looking at Bachmanity, what led you to found Bachmanity Capital, and what is your role there now?
Yeah, so I've been just always interested in like deep tech. So anything that's like Iron Man alike is really cool. So that's like kind of why I started Bachmanity. So we back a lot of like defense and deep tech companies. So we recently incubated a company called Thor Dynamics, which shoots 10 kilowatt lasers onto drones. Drone is going to be the next part of warfare, where it's like people are manufacturing drones, and other incumbents or adversaries are manufacturing drones at very, very high speeds and volume, right? So drone warfare is going to be pretty prominent. So we incubated a company to shoot these drones out of the sky and keep the U.S. safe. We've also invested in a couple different other companies, like, for example, Inversion Space, which is autonomous reentry space capsules, and then also Interloon, which is mining on the moon, which is pretty interesting.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. So typically when you're working with Bachmanity Capital, what do you look for in the companies that you're investing in?
So we do a lot of like deep tech and hard tech. So it's a lot different than traditional software investing. But pretty much there's a big risk when it comes to hard tech, right? And it's the science risk, so the physics risk. It's, is this actually possible to do, right? Like, and is it possible for the time being right now? Like Theranos would have worked out if it was 10 years down the line, but Theranos didn't work out because it was, one, wrong at the time, and two, not possible with the technology today, right? So it's figuring out if a company is going to defy physics, and then from there, figure out where the team is and that kind of stuff. But I think in general, 2 cents too. And I know this is like, when it comes to one, don't build companies to raise money. Raising money is not a status game. It's you're giving a part of your company away to investors to fund your company, right? And you're giving a chunk of your investors. So you're not giving them for free just to raise money. You're giving a chunk of your company. And most companies don't need to raise money. But when you raise money, it has to be because you need this expense or that expense. For example, we're a data company, right? Like if we didn't need to raise money, I would have not raised money. But we spend like over $20,000-$30,000 a month on servers just because we process a lot of data, right? So don't raise money just for the sake of raising money. And then also use it as like a tool versus like status. And then kind of like how venture works is that these funds want to pick the best deals, right? So it's not like you're pitching directly to VCs. VCs are actually trying to pitch to you. So they're trying to find the most impressive companies out there. And I don't think most people realize that, but it's not like you're pitching to VCs. It's that you want VCs pitch to you. And how can you get into that level? And, how can you sell sort of like your vision at the end of the day, right? And the more ambitious it is, the more interesting or more appealing it would be.
That's a really good point. A lot of the times the VCs are pitching to you and trying to tell you why they're the right ones to back you. We also noticed that you derived a lot of inspiration from the Silicon Valley TV show. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Also, maybe who's your favorite character?
It was just we were like, let's just call it Aviato. We couldn't think of any names. We were just like, hey, let's call it Aviato. And then ended up just doing that. If I'm going with Aviato, I have to go with Erlich Bachman. But I'd say with the fund, we're probably gonna have to change the name soon because we do a lot of defense and national security and a lot of like hardware companies, and it's hard to take them. It's hard for people to take us seriously, right? Even though we do a lot of policy, we help pass bills and lobby for our portfolio companies. It's hard for people to take us seriously. So we're gonna have to change the name soon. But Aviato's here to stay for some time.
So you're kind of known as the person who takes calls on top of the toilet. So how do you use social media marketing to kind of enhance your status, and how do you really get out there?
So it's interesting. I guess initially, right, we were like known for raising money in the high school bathroom. For context, I was in high school I'm still in high school, so I'm a senior in high school technically this year. But 2 years ago, I was a sophomore in high school, and people would take calls from like 9 to 5, right? And that's, I convinced my counselor that like urinary issues, like I had really bad UTIs. So they gave me a pass to use like the restroom, whatever. And then, I was like spending 5 to 6 hours a day in the bathroom, and there was like crazy stuff that happened. Like there were like drug dealers, so the content like came in immediately. Like I was buying hall passes from drug dealers to like get out of class and stuff like that. The bathroom was like straight hood. I think like Phillips and Over's bathroom is probably like a lot nicer, but I went to like a 5,000 like kid high school, right? So it was definitely interesting. Like I think initially it was just easy to make content out of, but also virality is very engineered, right? Virality is very engineered to a certain extent, where it's like anyone can sort of like go viral. Every single thing that you consume or news that you consume, right, are things that are a lot of them are actually engineered to be viral, right? A lot of the headlines, a lot of the stories. It's just what's eye catching, and virality kind of works where it's like you send something to one person, this one person sends it to different other people, and it kind of spreads, right? And kind of how you go viral is, it's figuring out like you one have to A/B test a story that one person could show to two different people, and then you have to figure out how to distribute it. So a lot of the bathroom stuff initially was not, like it was just I was just posting stuff out there, but then at the end or towards the end, right when it started blowing up, that was all engineered, which is like we were pretty careful in what we did to make it blow up, if that makes sense. But
That's awesome.
it wasn't fun. The principal didn't really like it. Like he gave me detention once. So I was buying hall pass on drug dealers, and the principal caught me for it. And then he put me in a detention, and then I tweeted about it. I was like, "Hey, you upgraded my office." And then he saw the tweet, and he kicked me out of the detention room and put me in a week in detention. So it was interesting. And then at the end, like I bought a green screen in the bathroom, and the principal found out and trespassed me from the school. So I'm not allowed 25 yards within my high school, which is interesting.
That's really funny. So what advice do you have for high schoolers who are looking to follow your path or accomplish all the things that you've done? Because I know so many students here are just very admiring of you.
Don't drop out, go to school, get good grades. And honestly, I don't think most people should actually start companies in high school. If you like look at, the kind of like track record, right? No high school entrepreneur has ever been successful. And there's a reason for that. It's you shouldn't start companies, and a lot of people they're just trying to start companies right during high school or right when high school starts, and that's like the first thing they've ever done, right? I would say actually work for a couple of companies. You would get a lot more value working at a very high growth startup because if you go out and if you go out and you're a high schooler and you're building a company, someone's going to have the same idea, all right? And the other person could be, this person that sold his last company, has a lot of experience. He's going to win, right? And you're kind of going against these incumbents in this space, which is really, really hard at the end of the day. And sort of going through like a really high growing startup or high paced startup, that kind of sets you on the right trajectory, or you could learn a ton. So when you start your company, pretty much what to do, how to build culture, etc. Right. So I would just say work for a company first before you start a company. And there's a lot more value in you working in a successful startup really early on than than going straight to building a company, if that makes sense.
Then for you personally, how did you go about starting a company?
So kind of how it started was initially like I was just doing a lot of, so I actually worked for a company initially. So the climate credit card that I was at, I was a third employee there, and then we raised $4 million. We ended up we were growing pretty fast, and then we ended up selling it to a massive company, right? And from that, I learned a ton. I started a company after that. I sold that, and then now I started Aviato. So it's kind of like this progression, if that makes sense.
What I'm really curious about is how you joined that company as your third employee. Like, what got you to that point?
So basically, and a lot of it was that I got really lucky. But I'm from Indiana, which is like pretty much middle of nowhere, right? And then I was like trolling this club called Hat Club. I got banned on there, and then I ended up like being Discord server, so like Claire, and I was like the 13-year-old and like I think like 15, 16-year-old like Discord server. So I was like super immature. I ended up trolling a ton. um, I ended up doing nonprofits and stuff like that. And then from there, someone sent the link to Gen Z Mafia, which was like San Francisco was a Discord server back in the day. So I ended up going on there. And then me and a buddy of mine, we would basically get jobs, right? And he ended up working for Sam Altman, which is the OpenAI founder. But basically, we would both get jobs, right? So like we would both get a job. And people in San Francisco are paying crazy amounts of money for really simple stuff. Like you got paid $5,000 for like a simple landing page. And then one of the person that I've talked to that was like looking for some jobs to do, or like someone to outsource some jobs, was a guy named Scott, and he was starting this company called Carbon Zero, which is the climate credit card. So I ended up trying to outsource something, and then I was like, hey, like this is actually an interesting company. So ended up working for him. And then that's initially how I ended up finding it. And then I think he made a tweet before too. I was like 13, and I was like, hey, here's like my resume and something like that. What would like here's the value I could provide, right?
So to provide some context, we're currently speaking to a group, like a room of 9th, 10th, and 11th graders who are all interested in starting a startup of their own. So do you have any like actionable advice to how they can go about doing this? And what you think was really beneficial for you along your journey?
I think it's pretty much just work for a company first before you start a company. Because like right now, like a majority of people are gonna start dating apps, right? Like either dating apps or apps for school, right? Or like which is like a lot of people are trying to do that, and that's because you don't have the scope of markets, right? Like if you're trying to start a dating app, if you're trying to start a school app, that's kind of the scope of visibility you have, right? But when you work for a company, you kind of see a lot of different other markets, right? And especially successful companies that have product market fit, you get to learn a ton from that and from that experience, where you have like a wider scope and you could build more I guess in-depth or more complicated products versus just like a lot of high-level things, if that makes sense.
How important do you think like coding and technical ability is along the process of making a startup?
Being technical is pretty important. Just because there's if you know two things, you could build a great company, right? you have to know how to sell and you have to know technology. Those are the two things that you need to know if you're building a software company or a technology company or a hardware company, right? You have to either know how to code or know how to sell. So master either one. If you want to learn how to sell, you have to learn how to build product and so on and so forth. But I think overall, it's overall to be technical to a certain extent, where you know what people are doing, right? And you know a lot of like stuff that's happening, so you're not like kept in the blind, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Eric. I think we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience.
Hi, Eric. I'm Drew. I was wondering, like, you said you got a few jobs and you were like 17. Like, or 16? How'd you balance this with like school and like how this like I know you said you got it from like a Discord server, but like how'd that
So
opportunity even come to you?
So yeah, if I was 17, it would have been harder, but I was 13 back then. So I was 13 when I got when I got the jobs and when I ended up working for the climate company. So it was a lot easier. It would have been a lot harder if it was like if I was 17, right? So I just turned 17 recently, but yeah, it's if I was like, junior in high school, I think it would probably be like a lot tougher. So it's
Like,
yeah.
why did the company hire a 13-year-old?
I think it was just really like one, it was well, age is interesting because if you leverage in the right way, you could get jobs or you could get opportunities, and a lot of people want to help younger people. 13 was just like a helping factor, and then you say, hey, here are like my suggestions, or show that you could provide value. I think those two things go hand in hand. A lot of people just say, hey, I'm 13. Here's my here's like here's my goals and stuff like that. Can you please help? Most of the time, it doesn't work, right? It's really just like using your age and then also proving that you're competent. Because at the end of the day, people are not going to hire you because you are 13. People are going to hire you because you're competent, and 13 would lower the bar, right? So,
What do you think was your edge in that case?
just because I learned a lot from building nonprofits. A lot of them were like pretty big hackathons, and then I also worked. So I worked on a ton of projects, right? So it's kind of like the snowball effect, where it's like all it takes is just your first project, and then you kind of just build on, and also build relationships. Like don't pitch people, build relationships, because relationships get you the longest way, right? So
All right, thank you, Eric.
no worries.
I just wanted to ask, like, if you were in like our situation of being like within your first 3 years of high school at like a pretty like resource rich institution, what would you recommend doing?
That is a good question. I think it's just build as much relationships as possible, right? So like primarily, yeah, just build as much relationships as possible. So I'm actually going to this university right now called University of Austin. So I think similar to Andover too, a lot of billionaires are backing it. There's a lot of talent network. I'm only here for like probably a year or something like that. But one of my investors, who was the co-founder of Palantir, he started this university with a couple of I don't know if you guys know Barry Weiss and Neil Ferguson. But they started a university with like a lot of really wealthy people, right? So they have a really good alumni network overall. And it's kind of just like build as much relationships as possible. Try to talk to the alumni, try to talk to the people, and then I think just playing the long-term game, right? Don't pitch them, just build a relationship, have them like you, be a likable person, and then they're going to help you later on. And then also building something makes it a lot easier to build these relationships.
Building something, you said?
Yeah, building something. So like if you're like starting a project, right? If you're building something cool, either you're experimenting, right, and stuff like that, it just makes it a lot easier.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
How did you like get in these discords in the first place? Like
I think a lot of that is like serendipity, right? Like where it's like uh, I think luck played a big part into it, where it's like I was just at the right place at the right time, and then I kind of just leveraged most of the network and try to make as much of it as possible, right? And then ended up like finding that building companies was pretty interesting. But there's like so many different things that you could do out there, right? So it's like not just building companies. Building companies is one of the hardest jobs out there, and it's tough, right? It's tough. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that you could go and ended up just getting really lucky and finding that building companies was just really interesting.
okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex. I just wanted to ask, what are your plans for like the future, for like future businesses, and like, do you plan to start like more companies?
I don't know yet. I've been working on this for quite a long time. So yeah, it's like 2.5 years or longer. But we'll see. I think I'm just going day by day. Like I'm still trying to figure stuff out. Still trying to figure stuff out. So we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes. Like it's still like pretty speculative, right? Last year and the year before was pretty crazy. So we'll end up seeing. Like I'm literally not allowed like 25 yards away from my school. So that's pretty rough.
What are some few like networking tips you have? Because you said networking is pretty important, and I do agree with that.
I wouldn't say networking because networking is kind of like a transactional term where it's like, okay, you give someone something, someone gives it something back, right? Really what you kind of need is just you got to ask for help with like some people. So you got to get people to like trust you and stuff like that. I think prioritize building relationships other than networking. Really just like make yourself likable. Don't be transactional when it comes to conversations. Right? Just talk to people kind of in a way where it's like, hey, like instead of like asking them for something, it's like, hey, tell them what you're working on. This is what I want to do. Do you know anyone that might be interested, or like, do you know anyone that might be interesting? Don't ask them specifically. And then I think once you like go through enough people, they're going to introduce you to more people, and then you grow your network from there.
Thank you, Eric. I also was just wondering, given like the surge in CapEx funding on AI, what is your view on sort of the oversaturated industries in the VC world, and what industries do you think like could use more capital?
Um, so AI is interesting because it was like if you're looking at over influx of capital, right? There's the AI bubble with rappers, which rappers is a very broad terms, but let's just say uses the open AI as their main product, right? The bubble has popped there, and the market has kind of normalized, right? Now chips is a different story. Chips is growing still, and it powers a lot of different things. There's a lot more utility when it comes to AI than Web3, which is why like Web3 ended up not doing so well. Other than the shitcoins, which like if you guys lost money on shitcoins, it's pretty rough out there. But yeah, basically, with AI, it's interesting because there's an influx of capital when it comes to like AI, right? And there's a lot of different like applications out there, and there's actual utility in the world where you're able to use that, and it's able to help the GDP, it's able to help worker efficiency, right, and stuff like that. It's about to make your life a lot easier. So AI is overall a net positive, and it's a net positive for society, right? And there should be that much funding. But sort of what I think the next hype cycle would be defense, which is, especially right now, right, in this world right now, there's a lot of wars that are happening, right? You have everything that's happening in the Middle East, you have everything that's happening in Asia, you have everything that's happening with Russia and Ukraine, right, and or Europe, right, and sort of what the world is seeing is that you need more technology when it comes to warfare. And US is very behind. When you look at like naval capacity, I think the statistic is like for every single one ship that the US produces, the China produces 300 naval warships, which is absolutely insane, right? And US does not have the capacity to take over to defend themselves from both what's happening in Asia, from basically what's happening in Iran, Asia, and also Russia, right? Kind of the line. Like the U.S. could take out if the U.S. was going against one adversary, which is like Russia, for example. Yeah, they have a chance, but if it's going through all three against one, it's going to be incredibly hard, right? And the wars are imminent, or wars are somewhat unavoidable to a certain extent. And I think the U.S. is realizing that. So a lot of money is going to be poured into national security and defense in the next couple of years. And you can see this with companies like Anduril, with companies like Saronic, right, and all these different different companies. So I think the next cycle would kind of be defense, and you could see how the world is shaping right now, especially with this upcoming election and the next upcoming election, which is all super speculative right now. But I think a lot of money is going to be poured into defense and hardware companies.
Absolutely. And do you think that more of like the traditional VC firms like Sequoia, Pear, Excel, do you think they're going to catalyze defense funding, or do you think that more specialized VC firms are going to play a bigger part in that?
A lot of so in Silicon Valley, right? Like 10 years ago, it would have been impossible for if you mentioned defense, it's almost impossible. It would be shunning the idea of defense, right? They would be saying, "Hey, this is absolutely horrible." But now a lot of VCs are actually really interested in kind of this idea because it's being more socially accepted, right? And there's war on like progressivism, which like is somewhat right, somewhat wrong, but when it comes to defense, it helps a lot, right? So I think it's trending into back into the I think the most technology is built during wartime, and we're kind of in this wartime or we're say right now, right? And we have to build as much innovation as possible to be able to defend the U.S. from its adversaries in the next couple of years, which a lot of people are definitely going to be funding when there's money in this space, and also two, it's more socially accepted now.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a freshman, and my question is, can you talk more about your nonprofit building experience and how that connected with like your actual job experience, like how it helped you per se?
So I'd say nonprofit like helped me a little. It's like kind of nonprofits are kind of like, you're building a company, but without all the pressure from the money, the financing, and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot more inefficient and it's really a lot more harder to do stuff, right? I think nonprofits like overall are pretty inefficient structure. It's like a good way to start where it's like but just too relaxed, and that's not what it trains you to build a company. A company, you're always in your war zone. You're always in the war zone. You're always going to run out of money, right? You're always like you're like X amount of days until you run out of money. You're X amount of days until you hit X amount of revenue. You have to go through a lot of tough situations, and it's quite different than building a nonprofit. So but yeah, it's pretty different.
Hi, I'm Eric, and you did like start your company kind of early. So like what makes you say that high schoolers like our age shouldn't start a startup, and like would you do it again?
Just because it's really hard to do it, right? Like for example, you kind of do miss some of the fundamental stuff, right? Like I've been trying to sit my ass down at Khan Academy over the weekends, just like learn calculus. So I think you learn a lot of fundamental stuff in high school. In college, it's like sort of exploratory, and that's why most of the founders, right, that are famous start companies in college. Like you see Peter Thiel, you see Joe Lonzo, you see Elon, all these different people. They all started companies during college, right? And then also like it building companies a full where we could like drop out. Building companies is a full-time job. It's like you have to spend 40 hours or more a week, right? A minimum, like you're usually in the office. Like I was in the office usually like 80 hours a week, right? So you're pulling a lot of the hours, it's a lot of work. And it's just hard to build that while you're in high school. Unless you go to the bathroom most of the time, which it doesn't really work for most schools, right? So, and also the bathroom was a very, very scary place. So it's yeah, there's some crazy stuff that happened there.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a junior. I'm actually from Carmel, so that's kind
Carlo,
of funny.
Indiana?
Yeah. But my
Nice.
question was, you've probably achieved more at like 17 than most people do in their 30s or even 40s. So how do you still manage to stay motivated even though you've already like accomplished so much?
First of all, I have not made it, guys. I have not made it. It is a C stage company. No, like I think it's like how you would define successful, right? Like if you think you're successful, you're just gonna not stop. You're gonna stop doing stuff. You're gonna, and I'm still at like really early in my career, right? So like I'm still really early in my career. Like a lot of people have built a lot of really big companies and stuff like that. We're still in our early stages. We're still building a lot of different stuff. We're heads down building. We're building our team. We're only 10 full-time people right now. We're seed stage company, so we're still very early stage. So very, very far from actually made it in life. But also like I think one of the things that is like really important if you're really young and if you're doing stuff is ego. Where everyone's gonna have a massive ego when they either figure out how to do something successfully, have a lot of press about them. Press at the end of the day is like a distraction or a smokescreen to a certain extent. Most of it's not, most of it's just distractions. But also like I think when you're reaching out to people and that kind of stuff, keep your ego low, be a likable person, right? And as long as you like stop considering yourself as like successful and stuff like that, you're gonna keep on going, right? And I think that's what a lot of like really young people like need to do. Like I've seen so many people that are like really young that have just a massive ego, and same thing with like child actors too. Like the reason why most child actors like fall off and you never see them again is because they have a massive ego. They think that they're the top of the world, and then they stop improving. And once you stop improving, you get left behind. And yeah, that's like that. It just becomes really bad.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a freshman, and you mentioned that networking is like really important for funding and things like that. But are there like any other methods that you would recommend?
I wouldn't say so. Like again, I think like networking is I think building relationships is the main thing, not networking. Like networking is like when you're trying to exchange value, which most of the time you don't want to exchange value, right? You kind of just want to build relationships with people. And how do you build relationships with people? Well, one, it's a long-term game, right? You ask for money, you get advice. You ask for advice, you get money. I think same thing applies, right? Um, Especially when you're really young, you should never ask for money. That's like one of the things I've learned. And then, yeah, like as like networking, don't be transactional. Like that's the biggest rule in business is just don't be transactional. You're transactional. If you're transactional, you're kind of a little bit rough, a little bit rough.
All right. Well, can we all give another big round of applause to Eric?
Remember, like to keep your head down, just build, and then yeah, do cool stuff, build cool stuff. So, I'm also like feel free to DM me. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and yeah, and pretty much on any social media out there. So, which is kind of bad.
Right.
Spend way too much time on
Thank you
Instagram.
so much.
All right, cheers.
Bye.